Alright folks, welcome back. So in the last video we spun up the fabric via the NDFC for data center 1 and we verified connectivity. We went from soup to nuts. We brought the switches in, we created the VRF, the networks, prepped the ports, attached the networks, and then we verified end-to-end connectivity. So let's jump right in and let's go ahead and do the same thing for data center 2. So we should be looking at the NDFC. We can see our DC1 fabric is in fact there. So let's go ahead and create a new fabric called DC2 eFabric. Once again, we're going to choose VXLAN EVPN. In this case, we're looking at 65002. So we go back to the topology. We're looking for 65002, and we're going to deploy the 10.2 networks as well as the shared 10.0.0.0. So we'll go ahead and leave everything under general the same. We'll take all the defaults for the most part. So under advanced, we need to lower our MTU. We're going to get rid of the OAM. We're going to activate the greenfield cleanup. All right. Freeform we're not touching. Resources, here's where we're going to change everything to 10.2. We're going to start from top to bottom. All right, so 255, 254, 253, 252. We'll change the VRF light deployment, which honestly doesn't matter in our topology. And then for the subnet range for that, we want 0.0. All right, that all looks good. And if memory serves, we're not tweaking anything in the last couple tabs. Okay, so we'll save that. All right, so obviously it's healthy because there's nothing going on. So we should be able to onboard our switches. So we're going to say under fabric switches, we're going to go into actions, add switches. We will seed them with, so this is 10.2.175 is the management in DC2. And we're going to not preserve the config. So this should give us 3 switches. All right, so that's perfect. So it came back with our spine and 2 leaves. So we're going to go ahead and highlight all 3, and we will add those switches. Okay, so we're back. All 3 switches have been added. They took considerably longer, which is a sign that the lab is starting to slow down. Just so you can see, if I go to the nodes list, you can see the switches are all kind of pegged at 100%. So this is kind of what happens. So we're going to just keep on trucking, but I have a bad feeling that I'm probably going to have to reboot a lot of this stuff before we finish this series off. Obviously, I'll do that on my time. So at any rate, the switches were added. We're going to hit close, and we're going to assign the roles. So the leaves are obviously going to stay as a role leaf. However, the spine is going to become a border gateway spine. So if we go back to the topology, we can see that we don't have dedicated border gateways in DC2. We just have the spine. So I had mentioned in the introduction that he's going to be doing double duty or performing double duty. So this is what we're getting at. So border gateway spine is the role he is going to play. So we get the recalculate and deploy warning message, which we know. But at this point, we are going to, from a fabric level, we are going to recalculate and deploy. This will be the bigger push that we do, or the biggest push of all of them. This should be a couple hundred lines of code per device. Okay, so the spine's not getting much right now, most likely because he's going to get more of his config when we start to do the inter-site, multi-site stuff. I'm curious though. Yeah, so essentially all he really needs to do is, the underlay, the route reflection for the two leaves, and the feature sets. So that sounds about right. So let's go ahead and deploy. When this is finished deploying, I will come back. I'm going to go ahead and just pause the video. Okay, so the deployment has succeeded. All three boxes now have received their configs. So let's close out there. Okay, so the next step, we don't see any VRFs obviously because we just created this fabric and we just brought switches in. So there's no VRF, there's no networks, and we didn't prep any interfaces. Now, that being said, let's jump over to the topology real quick. So, in fact, let me bring up my snip of the topology. So, essentially, what we need to consider next is, so we pushed the config for DC2. We applied the roles for the border gateway spine and the two leaves. We know DC1's done. We did that last video. Now we really need to consider bridging the two fabrics together, right? That's the end goal. So in this lab, we have one Nexus 9K-V, okay? It's a single switch, and all it's doing behind the scenes is basic VLAN access on these three ports. It's VLAN 255 on ports 1, 3, and 4. So all I'm doing is simulating traffic from spine 1 to be able to get to border gateway 1 and spine 1 to get to border gateway 2. That's all I'm doing. In a real world, you would have, maybe like some core switches, right, that are attached to each fabric. And then, there's going to be either interconnects or a WAN or who knows what's in the middle. It doesn't really matter as long as the latency is low enough to support, the VXLAN encapsulation from end to end. So I don't have enough resources to obviously simulate all of these boxes. So I'm just doing it with, like I said, the one Nexus 9KV. So it should still get the job done as far as the configuration goes. So what we need to do in reality is get the ISN built as a fabric inside of NDFC. And the reason we do that is we're going to start to develop a hierarchy. So what I mean by that is we now have DC1 and DC2 fabrics. We're going to create a third fabric, and it's going to be for the ISN. And then we're going to create a fourth fabric, which will essentially be the top tier fabric, and then we're going to add these two as well as the ISN under that fourth fabric. It'll make more sense when we do it. So let's just go ahead and see if we can add the ISN real quick. So we'll give it a name, ISN. We're going to choose the fabric. Okay, so this is going to be multi-site external network, okay? Network infrastructure attached to border gateways to interconnect VXLAN EVPN fabrics for multi-site and multi-cloud deployments. So that's what we want to choose here, okay? Multi-site external fabric. Now, in our case, I didn't put it in the topology here, but this is just going to be 65,000, okay? So this would be, you know, whatever autonomous system number is that you use to traverse your two sites. That's what you're going to have here. In my case, I'm just going to say 65,000. All right. So we don't care about monitor mode. All right, we're just going to disable that. We don't care about performance monitoring. All this we are going to leave as default. Resources, you know, we'll leave that. Config backup, we don't care. Bootstrap and flow. So that's an easy fabric to enable and configure. We're just going to hit save. Now, when we go into the ISN, we still need to add that device. Okay, so we come over to switches. We're going to say add switches. The ISN is 10.2.173.60. Okay. And this will support, by the way, this can be iOS XE, it could be a router, it could be an XR, like a 9000, something like that. So you can have something other than NXOS device. So I just powered this switch on. Hopefully it's up. Let's see. It doesn't say system ready yet, so I'm going to assume it's not. Okay, it did pick it up. Okay. Okay, so we're going to select that. We're going to say add switch. Hopefully this is a quick one because it doesn't really have much on it. But I will pause the video here just in case it does take a little while. All right, so the ISN switch has been added, as we can see here. So we'll go ahead and say close. Now, same story, he's not a leaf role, so we're going to have to change the role for the ISN. So in this case, the role he needs to be is a core router, okay? So we're going to select core router. It's given us the same message, recalculate and deploy. We're going to say okay. And we're actually going to recalculate and deploy. Okay, so we can see that there's 0 pending lines of config. Okay, so that's fine. We're going to hit deploy all anyway. So we can see here success, configuration deployment completed, and then we will hit close. Okay, so at this point, if I close out the ISN fabric, we now have 2 types of fabrics and 3 in total. Okay, so in the introduction or second video, I had made mention that we're going to be playing with like really 3 types. So we have one more fabric that we need to create. Okay. So let's create another fabric. This one's going to be called the multi-site domain, the MSD, okay? And this one is going to be VXLAN EVPN multi-site, domain that can contain multiple VXLAN EVPN fabrics with both layer 2, layer 3 overlay extensions and other fabric types. So we're going to go ahead and select that. So in this case, you can see here the multi-site overlay, you can do manual. So this means like, okay, we're going to configure the ISN stuff manually. You can do centralized to a route server. So that's if you have like 3, 4, 5 plus fabrics and you need to get all of them in a multi-site configuration. That's a lot of BGP peerings that you need to do between all the border gateways. So people will do, for scaling purposes, they will configure a route server, which essentially is a central peer that they can peer to just to exchange those routes back and forth. Okay, so the next thing we want to be concerned with here under the DCI tab is this checkbox here. So multi-site underlay IFC auto deployment flag, okay? So we want to enable this. All right, and the reason we want to enable this is going to actually configure our underlay between our border gateways and the ISN. Okay, so ultimately what we need to do is establish the underlay connectivity between all of these boxes so that ultimately the border gateways can do multi-hop eBGP across that underlay. So this checkbox will actually do the no switch port and the IP address peerings for those underlay links to establish that eBGP later. Security, we don't care. Resources, this could really be whatever you want. You know, you could change it to be something. I'm just going to leave it at 1010. That's fine. It's unique for this lab. You can change this to be, it just has to be unique. That's all it has to be. And then backup, we don't care. We're just going to hit save. So there are the three types of fabrics that I was alluding to from, you know, the beginning of the series, okay? We've got two that are the same, that are the DC1 and DC2 VXLAN EVPN fabrics. We've got the custom ISN, which is the core router, and then we have the multi-site domain. Now, when we go into the multi-site domain, okay, there's this concept of child fabrics. So we need to go to child fabrics, and when you hit the action button, we're going to say move a fabric into the multi-site domain. We're going to move the ISN. It tells you that after you do this, you're going to most likely need to recalculate and deploy. Okay. Then we're going to rinse and repeat, and we're going to say we're going to move in the DC1 fabric. It tells us we're most likely going to have to recalculate and deploy. And then last but not least, we will add the DC2 fabric. Now remember, we didn't build the VRF or the networks or any of that in the DC2 fabric. Quite frankly, we didn't do it in the ISN either, right? So the reason we didn't do that is because once we jumble this or bundle this into the multi-site domain, it should inherit the networks and the VRF that we have already built in DC1, because the fabric controller is kind of you know, the top tier boss. He's overseeing all the fabrics, so there's this kind of hierarchy around it. So what we need to do now is we're going to go in, let's just go into the ISN, let's do a recalculate and deploy, let's see what it needs. Okay, so apparently it doesn't need anything, that's fine. Let's check DC2, recalculate and deploy. Okay, so it's saying 0 lines. And then let's check DC1. Okay, we'll just deploy. It doesn't have anything, fine. And then let's go to the multi-site domain, recalculate and deploy. Okay, so here's where the majority of stuff needs to happen, right? So it's obvious now, right? So if we go back to the topology, if we go back here actually, we had said that what we're trying to do, right, is we have our NVE interface, right, on the leaf switches. So we have it here and we have it here. Then we're essentially have NVE interface on our border gateways, so there and there, and then we have one here and here. So all we're doing is we're doing tunneling between our leaf switches and the border gateways, okay? Then the border gateways are doing the tunneling across the ISN to the border gateway spine on the left. And then he does the NVE tunnels between the leaf switches. So you have 1, 2, and 3 hops essentially to kind of bridge end host to end host. So that's the whole point of doing, you know, the VXLAN tunnel endpoints. That's what they're talking about. You're just tunneling the traffic over all of this underlay networking segments. And that becomes kind of apparent when you see this config. It's only making changes to the 2 border gateways in DC1 and the spine in DC2 because that's where the modifications has to happen in order to make those VTEPs extend end to end. So hopefully that makes sense. Let's go ahead and just check what DC1 is going to get. So it starts to do the multi-site border gateway. It does the BGP, which is going to peer with the other side, which if you notice, it's eBGP multi-hop now. So we're essentially doing the eBGP from this border gateway to this spine, and it doesn't really know how many hops are in between. So it's going to do an eBGP multi-hop. So that makes sense. All right, and then we're telling the network virtualization edge that it's a multi-site border gateway. We're telling it what to use for the loopback. We're telling it which ports are facing the fabric versus which ports are facing the DCI or the data center interconnect. So those are 2 very important commands. If you do this via the command line, that's how it makes the distinguishment between local fabric and remote fabric, if you will. So this looks good. This looks like this should kind of complete the config. So let's see here. I just hit deploy. We'll see how long this takes. I'm going to go ahead and just pause the video real quick just in case it takes a little while. Okay, great. It looks like the deployment has finished. So we'll go ahead and close that. And at this point, what we should see is the multi-site domain, or the MSD, with the 3 child fabrics under it. Everything should be in a somewhat healthy state. We know that these are probably just going to be disconnected interfaces and stuff like that. So it's not the end of the world. Now, what we need to do a couple things before we consider end-to-end connectivity or any kind of verification. So we need to go into DC2 and let's look at VRFs now. So remember, we didn't create this VRF. This VRF has now shown up, as has the networks. But nothing has been attached. We still need to do the attachments to any interfaces that we have connected. So if we go back to the topology in DC2, we can essentially just say ports 4 go to that 10.0.0.0 and ports 5 go to the 10.2.1.0.1. So we can stick to that theme. So if we double click into 10.0.0.0 and we go to network attachments, we want to attach it to leaf 1 and leaf 2, okay? But here's where we need to circle back to something. I made a comment, I think it was last video, that we do need to attach this subnet to the border gateways. And that's so that it can extend that network across. Because if you want 10.0.0 to be reachable on both sides, which is what we want, the border gateways need to be able to exchange that information. So we're actually going to attach this network to all 3 devices in DC2. We're going to have to go back and attach it to the border gateways in DC1 as well. So we'll do that next. So we're going to edit. So we're going to attach it to leaf 1. Okay, we said port 4 gets attached. Oh, I didn't prep the interfaces. Let's do that. That's my bad. We need to go to interfaces first. That would have been bad. So let's go to interface equals Ethernet 1/4. All right, so we'll just do both, even though we only have one connected. We're going to say edit. We're going to change it to an access host. We'll turn BPDU guard off. Okay, save and next. We will fix the second leaf, change him to an access port. No, default. Save. Okay, we won't deploy this quite yet, okay? Because we need to do 1.5 as well. Okay, save. So we should have pending for 4 and 5, which is fine. Now we should be able to go back to networks, and let's do 10.0.0 first. Network attachments. We're going to attach it to all 3. So this is the border gateway, the border gateway spine. So you can see it's doing the VLAN. It's basically all we're going to do is attach it. There's no interfaces that we need to attach it to. We're just going to attach it. So we're going to hit save and next. Now for the leaf, okay, we're going to attach that to port 4 because that's where the end host is connected to, and now it's in access mode, so that looks better. Then finally we'll attach it to 4 on the second leaf, which we know it's not connected, but we're going to attach it anyway. So that's a pending change. Now we're going to go back to 10.2.101. We're going to go to attachments. We're going to attach it to all 3. So for the spine, it just gets attached, not necessarily to an interface. For the leaf 1, it's going to be port 5. And for leaf 2, it's going to be port 5. So now that is a pending change as well. You can see that 10.1.101 is an available network. However, we're not attaching it to a leaf because we're not extending that network across our fabrics. The only other thing we need to do is attach. So in DC1, we need to go to networks, and we need to attach the 10.0.0.0 to the border gateways, okay? So we're going to attach, and we're going to attach. Okay, so now we should have a bunch of changes that we need to deploy. So let's go to, this is the DC1 fabric. Let's see what it wants to do. So it wants to add the 51 lines of code to the border gateways, and that's most likely because we're extending that 10.0.0.0 network across the fabric. So we will go ahead and deploy that. DC2 should have a couple more lines of code because we're essentially prepping those interfaces and extending the 10.0.0.0 as well. I will pause the video and give this a few minutes to deploy. Okay, so DC1 deployment has completed. We can see that it executed 51 lines of code on both border gateways. Let's go and close DC1 fabric. Let's go to DC2. Let's do a recalculate and deploy. So we can see that on the leaf switches, we're in need of a lot of config. That's for the network attachments that we did. And the border gateway spine is going to need to be able to accept and advertise the 10.0.0.0 as well. So we're going to go ahead and deploy all. Once again, I will pause the video until this comes back. Okay, so all 3 were successful. This one shows completed, no commands to execute, because this one went the first time, the other 2 timed out. I had made mention of this. The lab is really starting to slow down at this point. Full disclosure, once we're finished this multi-site deployment, we will most likely stop. I'll reserve one more video for final verification and testing, but prior to that, I will most likely be rebooting all of this stuff. So let's close DC2. Let's go into the ISN and recalculate and deploy. Okay, he looks okay. So at this point, let's go to multi-site as well, sorry. Okay, so MSD looks like everything's in sync, no lines of code are needed. We'll just hit deploy all anyway, and we'll close. So at this point, this is what's gonna happen. We will stop here. We will have one more video where we go through final verification. We do some ping tests end-to-end, intrafabric. We'll check our peerings, and we'll kind of walk through all of the, well, not all the configuration, because I said I'm not gonna go in detail, but I do want to just point out the key pieces that kind of make all of this work. So thanks for sticking in there. I know this one was a bit longer, but hopefully it was worthwhile, and I will see you on the next one.